Her phone buzzed at 9:42 p.m. "Let me know when he leaves," the message read. It was from my boss. I stared at the screen while she slept beside me, the weight of betrayal sinking in like a blade between the ribs. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. My name's Daniel Hart. I'm 56 years old. I've never been the kind of man who needed much. Just a solid roof, clean conscience, and someone waiting on the other side of the door. I gave my life to two things: the company I helped build and the woman I married when I still thought love was a contract that people honored. At McGannon Industrial Logistics, I wasn't the loudest man in the room, but I was the one they trusted when things went sideways. I handled the ugliest freight deals, cleaned up messes executives couldn't afford to be associated with. 30 years in, never took a day off I didn't earn, never missed payroll, never cut corners. I wasn't flashy. I was reliable. The kind of man who holds everyone else's house together while his own quietly rots beneath him. Lisa and I were married 24 years. We had a rhythm: morning coffee by the window, quiet drives on Sundays, Chinese takeout on bad weather nights. She loved daffodils, couldn't stand the sound of dripping faucets. She ironed my shirts, whether I asked or not. I thought we were safe, maybe not on fire, but steady. Married like grown people are supposed to be married. That illusion died at 9:42 p.m. on a Thursday. She was asleep. Her phone buzzed, face up on the nightstand. I wasn't snooping, it was just there, glowing in the dark. "Let me know when he leaves." From Scott R., my boss, the same man who handed me a bottle of Glenlivet for Christmas and called me the backbone of the company. The man who sat next to Lisa at our last anniversary dinner and asked if we'd picked a spot for retirement yet. The man I once covered for when he forgot to sign off on a safety audit and almost cost us a client worth $6 million. I stared at the message like it had weight, like the words themselves were bricks stacked on my chest. My hands didn't tremble, my breathing didn't change. But I felt something shift. Not just in the room, but inside me. A tear? A crack? No, something cleaner, colder, like a steel cable snapping in the middle of a bridge. Silent, catastrophic. I got up, walked into the bathroom, closed the door, and vomited until my ribs hurt. Then I rinsed my mouth, wiped the mirror clean, and stared into my own eyes. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, and I knew my life, as I thought it was, ended tonight. But I wasn't broken. Not yet. The next morning, I moved like a ghost trapped in the body of a man who used to live in that house. I kissed her cheek. Same spot as always, just below the temple, where her skin still carried the warmth of sleep. She smiled, murmured something about the grocery list. I told her I'd pick up the eggs. Then I brewed her coffee. 2 sugars, no cream, just the way she liked it. And I made sure the mug she loved, the one with the chipped handle she refused to throw out, was sitting in its usual place. Consistency. That was my weapon now. At work, Scott greeted me like nothing had changed. His handshake was firm, performative, the kind of grip men use when they've convinced themselves they're still decent. "Dan," he said, with that smug tilt of the head, "appreciate you covering the Jenkins file." As if I didn't know he was covering my wife. I smiled back. The kind of smile you give to a man standing on thin ice he doesn't know is cracking. That day, I didn't do any real work. I watched, listened, tracked when Lisa texted and when he stepped out of meetings. I looked for absences that never made sense. Late starts, vague lunch breaks, weekend retreats where the vendor meetings had no corresponding receipts. And it lined up. Not in flashes, but in long, undeniable streaks. 9 months, at least, maybe longer. He booked a wine resort in Napa. Company retreat, he called it. Lisa had a spa weekend with her sister. Same dates, same location. He'd given her a prepaid Visa card. I found the statement when I logged into our joint bank account to pay the water bill. A transfer out, $5,000, listed as gift and wellness. The note read, "Enjoy the escape." I stared at that note for a long time, not just because he was sleeping with my wife, but because I was footing the bill. The car I paid for, the house I maintained, the utilities in my name, the insurance, the food, the vacations, all of it. I was underwriting their little fantasy while I sat across from him at budget meetings and shared a bed with her at night. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just stood at the window that evening, watching the light bend across the neighbor's fence. And I made a decision. If they were going to pretend I was invisible, I would become exactly that, until I wasn't. There's a difference between being quiet and being weak. People get that confused. Scott did. Lisa too. They mistook my silence for surrender. They didn't realize I was raised by a man who believed real power doesn't announce itself. It waits, watches, strikes once. I didn't scream. I didn't confront. I didn't play the fool they expected. I played the ghost. First move. I transferred my entire 401k into a private Roth IRA under a shell trust I'd set up 2 years ago as a contingency plan, the kind you don't talk about unless the world starts burning. I left no trace in our joint finances, no alerts, no paperwork mailed home, just a digital whisper in a system they'd never think to check. Second move, sick leave. 2 weeks, stress-related. HR didn't ask questions. I was old, loyal, dependable. The kind of employee they're afraid to offend. While Scott thought I was home with my feet up, I was 200 miles away in a cabin outside Fayetteville, sitting across from Joe McAllister, a property lawyer with a military jawline and a memory like a steel vault. We met in '98 after his honorable discharge. He owed me. Now I was calling it in. We went through everything, line by line. My assets, company policy, property documents, divorce clauses, HR charters, loopholes that weren't even illegal, just invisible to people too lazy to read between the lines. We found plenty. Turns out, Lisa never bothered to revise the mortgage paperwork after the 2009 refinance. I had consolidated under my name for the better rate. She never noticed. She signed it, distracted, probably watching Real Housewives while I handed her the pen. So legally, the house was mine. Every tile, every faucet, every inch of drywall she thought she'd scream in during divorce proceedings. Scott? He'd made bigger mistakes. He'd signed off on over a dozen travel reimbursements for client entertainment without actual client names. Guess who had copies? Me. Guess who was next in line to assume temporary executive duties in the event of corporate malfeasance? Also me. HR Charter, Clause 9.3b, buried under the succession protocols. Scott himself had pushed it through during the last policy update, thought it was just a formality. Most men don't read what they sign. I read twice. They had no idea the net they were resting on was mine all along, and I'd just started cutting the threads. Every step had to be clean. No heat, no drama. Just pressure applied in the right places until the structure collapsed under its own weight. The lake house was the first piece. A quiet retreat in Blue Water Ridge that Lisa liked to call her sanctuary. She had no idea it wasn't in both our names. Title history can be a tricky thing, especially when ownership runs through trusts and backdated amendments. I transferred it to my sister's LLC in under an hour. On paper, it looked like a simple refinancing shuffle. In reality, it was a wall being built around everything she thought she could claim. Lisa believed in leverage. I removed it. Next, I brought in someone I'd been saving for years, Cole Bennett, a forensic accountant who used to work for federal fraud investigations before going private. He was the kind of man who didn't blink at non-disclosure agreements and had no interest in morality. only facts and proof. I gave him access to 6 months of internal records, Scott's travel logs, corporate cards, expense reimbursements. Within days, he handed me a folder that made my stomach turn. Dinner bills for 2 in cities where no clients lived, hotel bookings under alias names, Uber logs that matched Lisa's phone location. It wasn't just adultery, it was embezzlement. I let it sit for a week, just to be sure. Then I booked Lisa a trip to Cancun. I said she deserved it. To relax, get her toes in the sand, clear her head. I handed her a prepaid card and smiled while she packed swimsuits I paid for, imagining a future I had already erased. She left on a Thursday. By Friday, I was sitting in a glass-walled conference room with 3 members of the board and 2 copies of Cole's report. The silence when they finished reading was better than any applause. They didn't ask why I'd compiled it. They asked what I wanted. By Monday, Scott was suspended for pending investigation into financial misconduct. I was named interim director. I shook hands, thanked them for their trust, and walked out with a calm so deep it felt spiritual. Lisa's flight landed late Monday night. She called me from the Uber, humming. I didn't answer. When she arrived, the house was dark. The locks had been changed. A folded cease and desist letter was taped to the front door, bearing my attorney's seal. The woman who thought she owned the home, the man, and the future walked into a brick wall of silence. And for the first time in months, I slept with both eyes closed. They called me like people drowning call for lifelines they once mocked. First Lisa, then Scott, then Lisa again. Dozens of calls, each one more frantic than the last. Some came in the middle of the night, her voice cracking over voicemail. Dan, please, just talk to me. It was never supposed to get this far. It was just emotional, Dan. I didn't mean to hurt you. But betrayal isn't an accident. It's a decision, repeated. Scott didn't bother with tears. He went straight to performance. His first message was calm, measured, almost paternal. Dan, I think we can handle this like men. Clearly there's been some overreach here, and I'd appreciate a chance to... Click. I didn't finish it. The man who had once referred to me as a pillar of integrity in front of the board was now accusing me of manipulating the system. I let them talk to air. I never raised my voice, never responded in kind. I didn't need to. That was the difference between noise and consequence. The audit had teeth. Once HR opened the file Cole prepared, it was over. There was no room for ambiguity, no plausible deniability left to spin. Not when travel receipts aligned with hotel surveillance logs. Not when emails sent from corporate accounts contained the phrase, "Just keep it discreet. He'll never find out." They didn't just bend the rules. They documented their destruction with timestamps and signatures. Scott's name was scrubbed from the executive portal by Friday. His CPA license, suspended pending criminal inquiry. When that went public, every vendor tied to him backed off. Lawsuits were whispered, then filed. The man who once cut my Christmas bonus because profit margins were tight was now holding yard sales on his front lawn. Lisa didn't fare better. She tried staying with a friend. That lasted 3 nights. Then she moved into the apartment Scott had leased for their little escapades, a mid-rise with smart locks, and a concierge who suddenly couldn't verify her as a tenant. When his funds froze, so did the lease. She packed her things into garbage bags, not suitcases. There was no safety net waiting, no fresh start, just eviction notices and silence. They hadn't just been caught. They'd been expelled. Not by my hand, but by the same system they believed was theirs to exploit. All I did was let gravity do the work, and it did. I didn't post about it, didn't broadcast a victory speech on Facebook or drop veiled messages on LinkedIn like so many men would. I didn't tell friends over beers or play the martyr at holiday dinners. Some battles are too personal to parade. This one was mine, and it ended the moment I stopped answering the phone. Instead, I made choices, quiet, surgical ones. I sold the house. Not out of anger, but utility. Every hallway had echoes I couldn't ignore. The kitchen still smelled like her perfume when the sun hit the windows. The bedroom. No matter how many times I changed the sheets, the shame hung in the air like mildew. So I stripped it all down, handed the keys to a real estate broker, and took the wire transfer as a closing ceremony. I bought a cabin in Wyoming, north of Laramie. Pine on all sides. No neighbors. No cell towers worth a damn. Just earth and sky and breath. The kind of place where you don't wear a watch because the wind already tells you what time it is. I wake up early now, not because of alarms or meetings, but because the light through the trees is honest. I split my own wood, brew coffee on a rusted stovetop. Some days I fish, others I read, and some days I just sit, listening to nothing. No fabricated stories, no performative affection, no masks grinning across breakfast tables. It's in that silence where I began to recognize myself again. Not the man defined by spreadsheets and birthday dinners and false anniversaries, but the man who knew how to be still and see clearly. Sometimes a letter finds its way to my P.O. box. Most are blank envelopes, passive invitations from people who want to hear what happened but are too cowardly to ask out loud. I throw them away. One came from Lisa. "You didn't have to ruin us," she wrote in narrow, familiar cursive. "You could have just left." I folded the paper in half, then again, and again, until it was a thick, meaningless square I dropped into the fire pit. The truth is, I didn't ruin them. They lit the match, poured the gas, and danced in the flame. I just stepped away before the house burned down. Let them sift through the ash. I have trees now, and silence. And not once have I missed the noise. It was mid-October when the knock came. Cold air had started crawling down from the hills, and I was halfway through stacking firewood when I heard the truck crunch over gravel. White Ford, business suit, the kind of posture you don't fake. Shoulders square, coat pressed, no wasted movement. He introduced himself as Mark Gelman. I remembered the name. Scott used to mention him like a trophy, one of the big clients who kept the lights on. Mark had always seemed untouchable, the kind of man who kept boardrooms afraid and interns whispering. But standing there, hands folded in front of him, he didn't look like a man interested in status. He looked like someone who'd seen the truth and respected it. He didn't waste time. "I've been watching," he said. "You handled a poisonous situation with military precision. No fireworks, no theatrics, just quiet force." He said the word force like it had gravity. He told me he'd pulled every document he could find once the audit went public. Said it wasn't just the scandal that impressed him. It was the silence I maintained while everything imploded. That kind of control, he said, was rare and valuable. He offered me a role, not flashy, not permanent, consulting, crisis management, reputation triage for executive boards who let rot seep in too deep. 6 figures to start. Flexible schedule. Complete autonomy. I took it. Not for the money. I'd already downsized my life to fit peace, not profit. But because something in me wanted to turn the blade outward. To use what I'd learned not for destruction, but prevention. To become the man you called when corruption started whispering through a company's walls and no one had the spine to confront it head on. I didn't tell anyone, didn't brag, just got back to work. As for Lisa, word filtered through eventually. Someone sent a message through a mutual friend. She was living with her sister in a cramped 2-bedroom, working part-time at a dental office. The same woman who used to scoff at small towns and coupon books was now clipping flyers and blaming the universe. She said I ruined her. but I never touched her. I just removed the scaffolding she used to build her delusions. I never needed revenge. That would have meant I still cared. What I needed was justice, and I got it. Not in the headlines, not in the courts, but in the mirror, clean and unflinching. This story was never about vengeance. Not really. It wasn't about making people suffer, though I won't pretend they didn't deserve to. It was about drawing a line, not in fire, but in steel. It was about reclaiming what was mine. My dignity, my voice, my place in a world that had quietly decided I was done. Men like me, older, quiet, overlooked, we get written off the moment we stop shouting. People mistake silence for surrender. But we're not weak. We're not fragile. We're not finished. We're calculating. We're patient. The world moves fast, but strength doesn't live in speed. It lives in stillness. In that quiet moment when you know you've been wronged, and choose not to flail, but to think, to plan, to act with purpose. You don't throw punches. You remove supports. You pull foundations out from under feet that danced on your name. That's what I did. No screaming, no threats, just careful steps taken in the dark until the spotlight hit and they had nowhere left to stand. People think justice is loud, gavels, sirens, screaming in courtrooms. It's not. Real justice is subtle. It doesn't humiliate. It strips away illusion. It leaves the guilty alone with the truth they spent years pretending didn't exist. Lisa's truth? She burned the bridge and never thought I'd let her drown. Scott's truth? He thought his title would shield him. It didn't. And mine? My truth was this. I didn't need to burn their house down. I just took back mine. Let them figure out how to survive winter without a roof. I've told this story now, not because I need applause, but because some man out there, maybe in his 50s, maybe silent at his dinner table tonight, is wondering if he's lost. If being dignified means being defeated. If being patient means being powerless. I'm here to tell you, it doesn't. You don't have to shout to win. You don't have to strike to destroy. You just have to remember who you are. And stop carrying what isn't yours. Lisa walked out of my life the day she made me her enemy, and I never saw her again. And I didn't need to. I didn't walk away to escape. I walked away to become untouchable.